whose responsibility is it in terms of doing the reading, right? You have so many people who are becoming more aware, but there are people who react negatively to the conversation because they feel that push of their involvement in it. Whose responsibility is it to have them do that reading? Should that be
I mean, I,
something that they do on their own? What role do we have in that?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely a personal responsibility and a personal accountability to be taken. Mostly everything that I've learned about these things have been unfortunately not taught in our public schools, and I'm sure not in private schools either, but have been something that I've had to go out and do on my own. So the information is out there. There's this cool thing called Google or YouTube that you can go on and find out a lot of information. There's a lot of great information out there for you to learn about it. And when we're talking about systems, we're talking about systems of oppression. I think a lot of people like to think of, the civil rights movement and segregation, Jim Crow, as so long ago. Look, my grandfather, who's still alive, marched in these marches. This is not that long ago, right? And we're talking about oppression. You're talking about generations of oppression, generations of not having equal access to money, generations of not having equal access to opportunity. So it's going to take real policies to actually, transform that, right? And so if we're just out there talking about, being anti-racist and being, which I love, being individualistic in the sense of getting involved, that's great. But we also have to come at these systems of oppression, right? We have to look at the political system of oppression, the economic system of oppression of Black people. This is widespread. If you think of white supremacy as a tree, right? The white supremacy is the root of that tree, right? So when you have the roots that spread everywhere, that becomes, involved in everywhere in a society in America, right? So we have to address those roots. We have to look to policies to actually fix that, right? So it's going to take a lot of effort. It's not something that's going to get done overnight. But if you're really, down for the movement, if you're really down with, your brothers, your Black brothers, your Black and brown brothers, then it's going to take all of us actually going out there, talking to politicians, holding politicians accountable, not just being on the right or on the left, right? It's going to actually take people. Are they just virtue signaling to you and saying, oh, we'll do this for you, and then when they get into office, they're not doing that? Or are they actually trying to propose and put forward things that are going to help Black and brown people who have been oppressed for hundreds of years? So I think that's something that we definitely have to keep our eye on, and I think it's something that can get easily lost in the weeds because, we do have a very polarized society and everything's so sensationalized. So I would really encourage everyone to do more research on that front. Because that's just as important as direct action and being out there on the streets.
Justin, Patrick, you both talked about what to read and reading and educating, and it's interesting. Some time ago when these discussions started, there were people, a lot of conversations going on about how do we educate ourselves, or we're going to educate, and everyone keeps using the word educate. And I just took this moment and I looked up in a dictionary the word educate, and nowhere in any definition that I found in every dictionary or on the internet was the word truth. And what happens is so often we are educating ourselves and getting information with things that are not absolute truth. And for years, I read this book when it first came out, called Slavery by Another Name. That came out in the mid 80s. I want to say it was around 2007, 2008. And I remember reading the book and finding out truths of the history that we were never taught in American history. And people that look like me specifically, we don't know all the truth, right? We don't know what was really done. We hear all these stories. There was this article last week in the Undefeated by Brando Simeo Starkey, and it's this brilliant piece about the truth and the history. And what happens is all the friends and the people that I've recommended this book to come back to me and they say, I had to put it down. I couldn't do it. And many of the people can't get through what the truth of this history is. And I think it's a terrible thing. And then when I hear that, to me, I say to myself, I'm like, wow, you're tired, really? Or how can you be tired? There are Black people in this country that have been living this and have been oppressed for, again, centuries. You think you're tired? Go look at tired. And to me, we need to educate ourselves on the truth, and the availability of the information is out there. It's just a matter of whether or not we really want to look at the truth.
And I think that education also comes through, it obviously comes through books. I mean, I love books. Like every year I have a book list of 250 books that I think my students should read that have to do with the lived experience. I think it's so important for white folk in particular because of their position and because of their positionality in the dynamics of white supremacy and of anti-Black racism and racism in general and marginalization. It's important for that education to be experiential. How is it that you're engaging and looking at and appreciating and respecting the lived experiences of people who do not look like you and who do not have the same lived experiences as you do? It's just like travel, going to another country, traveling abroad, going outside of your comfortable zone of proximal development allows you to be a stronger and greater democratic instrument. So one of the things that I think is so important to do is to really, and I know that, we talk about having difficult conversations and things like that. Real difficult conversations have to do with going outside of your comfort zone. Not only, calling on the phone and having conversations with folks who don't look like you is one thing. And I think that's a step, and it's an important one that a lot of my white friends have taken. But then when are you coming to my institution? When you're coming to Morehouse College to take a class? I've had a couple of coaches say that they're interested in doing that. That becomes part of defining yourself as not rhetorical, but a practicing ally. And how is it that you're going to use your privilege? How is it that you're going to use your status to step in the gap of those folks who have been marginalized for centuries? How is that work done? So I think that as we're looking at pointing to policy, which is crucial and important, as we're looking at programs and how we're going to support and lend our efforts to programs, which is crucial and important, how it is that we're going to leverage and be informed and educated voters as we're coming up on election time, all of those things are profoundly important, but it also has to do with the lived experience. How is it that you're going to respect and understand and appreciate and privilege and center people who don't look like you? That's a part of what's uncomfortable. That's a part of what real sacrifice looks like. And that is going to make significant changes and pushes forward. Those are the kinds of things that we really have to wrestle with, because I know that as we look at, the uprisings that took place across the country in various major cities, as we're looking at, the pulling down of racist statues that exist, all of those things are important, but it's also important for us to do self-evaluation and hold one another accountable to what our beliefs have historically been and what our practices have been. And if they have marginalized people, if they have put people at the bottom while we are hierarchically situating ourselves above, we have to change that behavior. And in examining that, that allows us to attach to policies. It allows us to attach to practices in ways that are going to allow them to stick.